She was once a hero, trained for danger, fearless in the face of chaos. Her name was Roxy, a retired K9 German Shepherd who had served in war zones far from home. She had sniffed out explosives, protected lives, and stood tall among the bravest. But that was a lifetime ago. Now her world had narrowed to quiet mornings and gentle walks through the wooded farmland of Missouri, where peace had finally found her. And in that peace, she had found something even more precious: motherhood. Her pup Max was barely old enough to understand the world, but his eyes sparkled with the same fire that once burned in hers. To Roxy, he wasn't just a son. He was her legacy, her reason to keep going. That morning, clouds hovered low over the horizon, heavy with summer rain. The smell of damp earth mixed with wildflowers as Roxy padded beside Max near the river's edge. It was supposed to be a lesson in courage, just the two of them exploring the edge of the world together before the storm rolled in. But fate doesn't ask for permission. One moment, Max was at her side, his little tail wagging with curiosity. The next, he slipped. The mud along the Missouri River had grown slick from the mist, and with a panicked yelp, Max tumbled down the embankment. Roxy lunged, but it was too late. The pup hit the water with a splash far too loud for his tiny body, and the river, merciless, swollen with summer rain, took him. Panic hit her harder than any explosion she'd faced in combat. She charged after him without thought, her body moving on instinct. Muscles trained in war, now burning with something far more primal, a mother's terror. The current was ruthless. It dragged Max further and further, his tiny form barely visible. Between the ripples and foam, Roxy's powerful legs kicked through the water, her breath ragged, her vision blurred by the rain now falling in sheets. She had faced gunfire. She had faced death. But she had never faced this. The helplessness of watching her child be pulled away by something she couldn't fight. And just when her strength began to fail, when the river felt too wide and her heart too heavy, something moved, a shadow on the far bank. Something massive, something wild. It stepped forward with purpose, golden and fierce against the storm. Roxy didn't know it yet, but the course of their lives was about to change forever, because the one who would save her pup wasn't a soldier. Wasn't even human, it was a stallion. The river had no conscience. It didn't care that Max was only a few weeks old. It didn't care that Roxy had once faced bullets and bombs and survived. All it knew was movement, cold, relentless, and wild. And in that moment, it had claimed something far more fragile than any enemy Roxy had ever known. Max's yelps were swallowed by the roar of the current, his tiny paws flailing against the unforgiving tide. His head bobbed in and out of sight, each second dragging him farther from the bank, and farther from his mother. Roxy was already in the water, her body slicing through the current with every ounce of strength her years of service had left her. She wasn't young anymore. Her muscles, once like coiled springs, now burned with the ache of age. But none of that mattered. There was no hesitation, no fear, only purpose. Save him. But the river didn't yield. It pulled harder, faster. The weight of the rain, now pounding from above, blurred Roxy's vision and sent chills deep into her bones. Still, she swam, her eyes locked onto Max, whose cries were growing faint. Her heart thudded louder than the thunder rolling above. With each powerful stroke, she inched closer, but it wasn't fast enough. The current was a monster, one she couldn't outrun. She pushed harder. Water surged into her ears, her mouth, stealing her breath. Still, she pressed forward. Her training told her to fight. Her instincts told her to protect. But something else whispered in the background, something she couldn't ignore. She wasn't going to make it. Max was too far. The water too strong. Her body too old. And that realization pierced her heart sharper than any weapon ever could. A helpless whimper escaped her throat, barely audible over the storm. No, not like this. Her legs kicked harder. Her lungs screamed. Her vision began to tunnel, the world narrowing into the single image of her pup being carried away. And then, movement. Out of the corner of her eye, something large emerged on the far side of the riverbank. A figure, towering, solid, golden against the gray. At first, Roxy thought it was a mirage, her exhausted mind conjuring a memory of her younger days. But it moved. It charged. Through the rain, a mighty form leapt forward, hooves pounding the soaked ground, mane whipping like flames in the storm. A stallion, a wild one, unbridled, untamed, and utterly fearless. Before Roxy could understand what she was seeing, the horse was in the river, plunging headfirst into the same vicious current that was trying to swallow her pup whole. It defied everything she knew. Horses avoided danger. They ran from fire, fled from storms. But this one ran into the heart of the chaos, toward Max. Roxy's muscles faltered. She couldn't keep up. Her eyes, clouded by rain and desperation, followed the stallion as he surged. Through the water with power she hadn't seen in years, not even among her fellow canines. It was like watching nature fight nature. The stallion moved with purpose, with precision, his eyes focused not on escape but on rescue. And then, impossibly, his neck curved, his massive head dipping low, guiding Max's flailing body toward his thick, wet mane. Max's tiny paws clung instinctively, and the stallion, Dernayushi, began the fight back toward land. Roxy watched, breathless. Her body refused to move now, her limbs numbed by the cold, the current dragging her back. But she didn't care. He was safe. The moment Max wrapped himself around the stallion's mane, something inside Roxy snapped. The last of her strength gave out. She stopped swimming, stopped fighting. The last image burned into her fading vision. Her pup clinging to a creature that shouldn't have been there, but was. Her body struck the bank hard, carried by some merciful twist in the current. She collapsed against the mud, her eyes wide, heart racing, gasping for air. And then, darkness. Not fear, not sorrow, just black. The rest of the story would unfold in the silence that followed, in the spaces between what seemed possible and what was. And somewhere, deep in that silence, a wild stallion had done something no soldier, no handler, no human ever could. He had given her pup a second chance. Warmth. That's what she felt first. Not the heat of the sun, but something gentler. The faint press of a small body curled beside her, the familiar scent of fur and safety. Her eyes fluttered open, the world slow to come into focus. Her ears caught the rustle of trees in the wind, bird song, and there it was, a soft whimper. Max. Roxy groaned as she lifted her head, every muscle aching from the fight with the river. Mud clung to her coat. Her legs trembled beneath her. But none of that mattered, because her pup was alive. Curled up beside her, shivering but breathing, Max let out a tiny, relieved yelp the moment her eyes met his. She nudged him gently with her nose, checking every inch of him. No wounds, no limp, just a little cold and a lot of shaken. And then she saw him. Just beyond them, no more than a dozen feet away, stood the stallion. Towering, still, silent. His golden coat gleamed wet in the dim light filtering through the clouds. Raindrops clung to his mane like jewels. He stood with the stillness of something ancient, as if the storm and the river had never touched him, as if saving a drowning puppy from certain death was simply what he did. Roxy pushed herself upright, though her legs protested. Her gaze never left the stallion. Who was he? He took a single step forward, massive hooves sinking gently into the wet ground. His head lowered, slow, deliberate, until his muzzle brushed lightly against Max's fur. A soft nudge, tender, reassuring. Max whimpered again, not in fear, but in recognition. And then he pressed himself closer to Roxy, burying his head under her chin. The stallion stayed there, motionless, a golden sentinel in the aftermath of chaos. Roxy didn't bark, didn't growl. She didn't feel the need to protect or to flee. Instead, there was an overwhelming sense of calm. For hours, they stayed that way. The rain passed, the wind eased, and the stallion remained, as if standing, guard over mother and child. It wasn't just unusual, it was unreal. Roxy had trusted humans, fellow dogs, even the rhythm of danger, but never something wild, something untamed. And yet here, in the presence of this creature, she felt safer than she had in years. As the afternoon wore on, the stallion finally turned his head, glancing toward the distant hills. His eyes met Roxy's one last time, deep, intelligent, unspoken. Then, with a grace only the wild could know, he turned and galloped off, his golden form cutting across the landscape like a flame set free. Roxy watched until he disappeared. Her body sagged with exhaustion, but her spirit trembled with something else. Awe. She had seen courage, she had seen sacrifice, but never from something that didn't owe it to her. That night, under the rising moon, Roxy and Max made their slow way back to the farm. Every step was heavy, but her heart was full. The world had changed. Something had shifted in her bones. Max walked beside her, quieter than usual. No playful nips, no bounding joy, just a steady trot. Like he, too, had seen something that would live in his soul forever. The next few days passed like a dream she couldn't shake. She couldn't stop thinking about the stallion, his eyes, his strength, the way he had moved without hesitation. Horses didn't save drowning puppies. They didn't stand watch over strangers. But this one had. Roxy would find herself wandering to the edge of the pasture, staring toward the hills. Had he returned to a herd? Was he alone? Why had he helped? There were no answers, only a growing pull in her chest. Max, too, seemed changed. Though young, he was more aware now, more still. His eyes followed birds differently. His ears perked at sounds Roxy couldn't hear. And sometimes, when the wind shifted, he would stand still and lift his nose as if searching for something. Then, one morning without a sound, Roxy began to walk toward the hills. She didn't know what she was looking for, only that she had to go. And Max, now stronger, steadier, followed without question. They crossed streams and fields, climbed ridges and wandered through wildflower meadows. The world became quieter with every mile, as if the wild itself was holding its breath. Finally, from the crest of a high ridge they saw it, a valley hidden between rolling hills, lush, untouched. And there, at its heart, stood the golden stallion, surrounded. By a small herd of wild horses he stood apart, tall, alert, noble. Roxy didn't move, didn't bark, she just watched. So did Max. Something in her heart stirred. This stallion wasn't just a savior, he was a guardian, not just of his own kind, but of anything vulnerable, anything in need. And as his eyes found hers across the valley, she knew. He remembered. You would have done the same for me. His gaze seemed to say. Roxy's chest swelled, not with pride, not with duty, with something deeper, understanding. Peace never lasts forever. Roxy had learned that long ago, in the sharp cracks of gunfire, in the silence after a mission. She had learned it again in the current of the Missouri River. And now, just as the valley had begun to feel like a place of healing, the warning returned. This time it came on the wind. The first sign was the scent, sharp, acrid, unmistakable. Smoke. At first it was only a whisper on the breeze, barely enough to stir her fur. But Roxy's instincts, honed by years of danger, kicked in instantly. She rose from where she'd been resting with Max beneath the trees, her ears pricked forward, eyes scanning the horizon. In the distance, the sky was darkening, not with storm clouds, but with smoke. Thick and low, carried by the dry summer. To the end somewhere, a faint glow pulsed like a heartbeat. Fire. She barked once, short, urgent. Max was on his feet in a heartbeat. He stood close beside her, sensing the tension in her body. But before they could move, a high, clear whinny cut through the air. At the ridge above them stood Valor. His golden coat was dusted with ash. His head was high, nostrils flared, muscles taut. Behind him, his herd shifted anxiously. Foals huddled against their mothers, hooves stomping in unease. The fire wasn't far, and it was coming fast. For a single heartbeat, Roxy hesitated. Her mother's instinct screamed at her to turn back, to get Max to safety. But then, Valor moved. He reared high on his powerful legs, hooves slashing the air. Not in panic, in purpose. And then he ran, straight toward the smoke. Roxy's breath caught. He wasn't fleeing, he was going into the fire. Her mind raced. There must have been others. Stragglers, young foals, separated from the herd. And Valor, the wild guardian, was going to find them. Before she knew it, her body was in motion. She barked once, sharp and commanding, telling Max to stay. He whimpered, wanting to follow, but obeyed. And Roxy ran after Valor. The smoke thickened quickly. The ground grew hot under her paws. The fire crackled in the distance, growing louder. With each stride, the sky turned a sickly orange and ash began to fall like snow. But she pressed on, tracking the thundering sound of Valor's hooves. They found them near the ravine, a pair of young foals trembling and pinned against a drop-off. Flames licked the dry brush nearby, inching closer by the second. The foals screamed in terror. Valor charged between them and the fire, his body a shield. He nudged the panicked animals, guiding them with careful force. But they were frozen, eyes wide with fear. Roxy barked, loud and fierce. She circled wide, cutting off the flame's path. Her voice, sharp, commanding, broke through their panic. The foals turned, moved. Step by step they climbed. Valor flanked them, muscles bunching with each powerful stride. Roxy darted behind, herding them like she had once done in military drills. Only this time, there were no commands. No handler, only instinct. Together, horse and dog moved as one. The last foal scrambled to safety just as a gust of wind fanned. The flames higher, the fire roaring like a living beast. Roxy coughed, her lungs burning, but she didn't stop. Only when the foals were safe on higher ground did Valor finally turn. He met Roxy's eyes and something passed between them. Something wordless but immense. Trust. Not just earned, but proven. They had done it. Together. As fire crews arrived and helicopters roared overhead, dousing the flames, Roxy and Valor stood side by side on the ridge. Below them, the herd was safe. The valley still smoldered, scarred but not destroyed. And in the rising light of dawn, smoke curling around them like mist, Roxy saw Valor not just as a rescuer, but as an equal. He had no leash, no collar, no rank, but his heart beat with the same rhythm as hers. Protect, serve, save. Not because they were told to, but because it was right. When Roxy finally returned to Max, her legs shaking from exhaustion, he raced to her with a cry of relief. She nuzzled him close, breathing in the scent of his fur. Home, hope, the future. Behind them, Valor stood silhouetted against the early sun, the wind tugging at his mane. No words were needed. He had given his strength to the weak, and now he gave her something else, a reminder that heroism was not bound by species nor by training. It lived in the choices made when no one was watching. It burned brightest in the quiet, selfless acts that shaped the world. Time passed. Summer faded into autumn, and autumn surrendered quietly to the chill of winter. The once scorched valley began to heal, its blackened scars slowly dressed in fresh green and budding wildflowers. Life, persistent and stubborn, returned. And with it, so did something else, peace. But for Roxy and Max, it wasn't the same kind of peace they had known before. It was deeper now, earned. Every sunrise felt more sacred. Every breath a reminder of what had been risked and what had been saved. Max had grown. No longer the trembling pup swept away by a river, he now walked with a sure-footed confidence. His legs were long and strong, his chest broad. But more than his body, it was his presence that had changed. He didn't just follow Roxy anymore. He moved with purpose, often ahead of her, his eyes scanning the horizon the way she used to in her younger days. Roxy watched him, sometimes from her resting spot near the old barn, pride swelling in her chest. He was becoming something remarkable, and yet the lessons he carried weren't hers alone. They belonged to another too. Valor. Though the stallion had long since disappeared into the hills, his presence lingered in every part of Max's being. Roxy saw it in the way her son tilted, his head to the wind, in the calm steadiness in his gaze, in the quiet courage he carried like a badge on his heart. And then came the test. It was a day like any other, a gray winter afternoon. Clouds hung heavy in the sky, and frost glazed the earth. Roxy lay curled under the old oak tree, savoring the warmth of Max pressed against her side. The world was still, until the cry. A sound pierced the quiet, sharp and desperate. A child's. Billy panic. Roxy was on her feet instantly. Her joints ached, slower now than before. But Max was already gone. He had heard it too, and he was running, through the trees, across the frozen ground, toward the sound. Roxy followed, her heart pounding with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Fear, not for herself, but for Max. They reached the pond at the edge of the farm, and the sight froze Roxy's blood. A boy, no more than 8, stood at the center of the frozen surface, the ice beneath him cracking in a web of danger. His arms flailed for balance. His lips trembled. One wrong move, and the ice would give. And there, low to the ground, crawling with careful intent, was Max. Roxy stopped at the shoreline, helpless once again. Her breath caught, the memory of the river roaring in her mind. This time, it was her son on the edge of the impossible. But he didn't falter. Max crept forward, his body low, spreading his weight evenly. Every step was deliberate, learned. He barked, low and steady, his voice cutting through the boy's panic. "Lie flat," he seemed to say. "Don't move fast. Trust me." The boy froze, his eyes locked on Max's. Then slowly, he obeyed, dropping flat onto the ice. The creaking beneath them was unbearable. One crack too deep, one movement too quick, and it would all end. But Max was calm, patient. He moved inch by inch, nudging the boy's side, guiding him. Slowly, they made progress. Roxy couldn't breathe. Every second stretched into eternity, and then the boy's hand grabbed the edge of the bank. Max gave one final push with his shoulder, helping him scramble up onto solid ground. The boy was safe, but Max was still out there. The ice groaned as he turned to make his way back. His legs slipped once, skidding across the slick surface, but he recovered, determined, focused. Not for glory, not for reward, just because someone needed help. When he reached the shore, Roxy rushed to him, pressing her nose into his fur. Relief poured over her like sunlight. He was trembling, wet, cold, but alive. And more than that, he had become what valor once was, a protector, a guardian, a quiet hero. The boy's parents arrived moments later, frantic and crying. They scooped their son into their arms, thanking Roxy and Max over and over. But Max didn't look for praise. He sat quietly beside his mother, chest rising and falling, his gaze still turned toward the ice, as if already watching for the next soul in need. That night, the snow fell heavy. Roxy and Max curled beneath the old oak, the cold softened by the warmth between them. Above, the stars shimmered in the velvet sky, and for a brief moment, Roxy saw it again. Him, Valor, standing on a distant ridge, his mane glowing like gold, his eyes proud and steady. Not for what she had done, but for what she had passed on. Max shifted closer, his breath warm in the still air, his heart steady beneath her chin. Roxy closed her eyes. Her work was done. She had given the world something far greater than memory. She had given it a new guardian. Winter came gently that year. The mornings were quiet, wrapped in a blanket of frost. Life on the farm slowed, as if the world itself had paused to rest. But for Roxy, the stillness wasn't empty. It was full of memories, of moments stitched together by courage and sacrifice, of rivers and flames and frozen ponds, of wild stallions and quiet acts of heroism. She moved slower now, each step carrying the weight of years well lived. Her muzzle had grayed, her breath shorter. But her eyes, those sharp, intelligent eyes, still held the spark of a soldier and the softness of a mother who had loved deeply and without fear. Most days, she simply watched. From her favorite spot, beneath the old oak tree, she followed Max with quiet pride. He was everything she had ever hoped for: strong, confident, kind. He walked the world like it was his to protect, not with arrogance but with purpose, and the others followed. The sheep trusted him. The lambs played near his paws. Even the wind seemed to bend gently around him. He had become something extraordinary. But never loud, never boastful. Just good. And in his every move, Roxy saw echoes of the golden stallion who had once defied a river to save him. Valor. Sometimes, when the wind blew just right, she imagined she could still hear the distant thunder of hooves on wet earth, still see that golden figure standing tall on the ridge. His legacy didn't fade. It lived on in Max's steady gaze, in his selfless acts, in the way he never turned away from those in need. And Roxy, though her time was growing short, felt peace, because she knew. Heroes didn't always wear badges or bark commands. Sometimes, they galloped wild through valleys or curled up beside you in the snow. Sometimes they left without a sound, and sometimes they stayed, not in body, but in spirit. That winter, as snow blanketed the fields and stars shimmered in the deep sky above, Roxy lay quietly beneath the tree, Max beside her, the world still and safe. She had done her duty. She had fought. She had loved. And she had passed on everything that mattered. As her eyes drifted closed, a final thought warmed her heart. Heroes don't always stay, but their stories do. And this story was just the beginning, to be continued. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes in second chances, in kindness from unexpected places, and in the quiet, extraordinary courage of those who protect without promise of praise. Stay tuned, because sometimes the wild still has more to teach us.